Hey, Ty, did you know Alucard is Dracula's name spelled backwards?
Whoa. God, dude. Then that means wow. Wow.
Did you know Chrono Trigger's Princess Nadia's name spelled backwards spells Aidan? Makes you think.
That mean your middle name Eon? Or would it be Earl Arm?
I might be Guardia royalty.
Wow,
And just not
incredible.
know it.
You'll have to show me the pendant.
I'll go digging through my parents' basement and find it.
Hopefully they didn't put it in one of those sealed boxes.
Uh-oh. Then it'll be a powered up bracelet by the time I'm like 90.
You've got FunFactor, two old gamers reviewing old video game magazine reviews. I'm Ty Shelter, he's Aidan Moher, and we're two professional writers who grew up loving the video games and video game magazines in the 1980s, 1990s, and 2000s. Every episode, we take a critical look back on the games media that, for better and for worse, inspired us to do what we do. First, go to funfactorpod.com and follow the show on your podcatcher of choice. Leave us a rating or review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your media. We'll read the best, kindest, funniest, and most insightful ones on the air in our letters section. Please consider becoming a member of FunFactor Ultra, our premium tiers that unlock ad-free episodes, bonus episodes, and the members-only channels of our Discord. Just go to funfactorpod.com and I promise you cannot miss it. Then, help us spread the word. Shout us out on Blue Sky at funfactorpod.com and everywhere else at FunFactorPod.
Okay, Ty, today we're going to go deep on something that we have touched on quite a bit on previous episodes. We're covering the generation gap, right? The end of the 16-bit era leading into the 32-bit era with the PlayStation and the Saturn and the Nintendo 64. And today I want to talk about the promised death of 2D graphics. Because among many leaps during this time, one of the most significant technological advances was access to 3D, processors and chips, opening up, pun intended, a whole new dimension for creators. But it wasn't always an improvement. For every Super Mario 64, which magically transitioned Mario into 3D, there were a dozen failed attempts to do the same, from Castlevania on the Nintendo 64 to Bubsy 3D and, if you'll allow me a deep cut, Grand Stream Saga. But as popular wisdom goes, console makers like Sony and Nintendo were so bent on the new technology that they were actively discouraging the publication of 2D pixel art games on their consoles, especially in the West. Now, the Sega Saturn was a whole other story. Bonus episode material, maybe. But Sony and Nintendo with the Nintendo 64 and the PlayStation, it was popularly known that they were discouraging 2D, but I wonder about that sometimes. We've talked a lot about my impressions of early 3D graphics, outside of heavy hitters like Super Mario 64, Final Fantasy VII. The games on my radar during those early years were stuff like Suikoden, Beyond the Beyond, Wild Arms, 2D RPGs that were basically just like slightly souped up Super Nintendo games, but which used 3D in limited capacity, which was mostly battle scenes where it made sense. In hindsight, how much of this do you attribute to like the iron-fisted console makers, forcing developers into 3D games, and how much was just excitement among the people creating games, trying to make trying out old ideas in new space?
Yeah, I think it's partly the coming from the audience too, right? That's both journalists that we've been talking about and reading about, right? And it's also coming from the people buying the games. But people want new things. Like, technology was so new and exciting. Advances were coming fast and furious, right? And we'd had an eternity of all video games being 2D, right? And they went so fast from arcade and Atari to NES to Super NES, and that drive for new, next. And you saw well-executed 3D. I mean, we don't think of Virtua Fighter or Daytona USA necessarily as well-executed 3D now. It's not pretty, but it was new and it was smooth and it was exciting and it enabled whole new genres that didn't exist before. I mean, even, stuff like Wolfenstein 3D or whatever, like first-person shooters in that polygonal environment. That was new and it was exciting and it was different. People wanted more as fast as they could get it.
No polygons in Wolfenstein.
Fair. But you know what I'm saying, right? There was definitely that rush, what is possible, right? And it seemed like what is possible was exploding year over year over year and getting just a really polished version of the same stuff we'd been seeing already just was not as exciting or interesting.
Right. I think that's, I guess I look back and I wonder how much was like organic demand, you know, a bunch of 12-year-olds with their Super Nintendos looking at Stunt Race FX or Star Fox and be like, oh, I need more games like that, not more games like, you know, Donkey Kong Country, which was like sold as a 3D game, but it was 2D, or whatever, Yoshi's Island, Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy VI. And how much was driven by, you know, what we're seeing sort of now with AI being forced into everything, or 3D films, when you have sort of like tech companies that want to push their next product. They want to be the next internet. They want to be the next telephone or light bulb or whatever. And so they're constantly searching for that. And was 3D ready at the time to like make the best video games possible? You know, saying all that, I love the Saturn. I love the PlayStation. PlayStation is one of my favorite consoles. Same with Saturn. Nintendo 64 is such a curious and interesting game system because it experimented so much. And so I'm not like leading myself down any sort of like revisionist history of these systems not being good, but like, what was the origins of this? Was it really demand? Because as we're going to see in a sec, it wasn't necessarily the games press that was kind of like driving this messaging forward, at least not like wholly. I'm going to do something a little unorthodox here. We're going to flip over. We're going to flip open a different magazine for some context.
Oh.
I've got the June 1997 issue of PSX magazine here. And EIC Todd Mowett's editorial touches directly on this matter. Ty, can you read the excerpt below here?
I would like to touch on a much more volatile topic. Sony appears to be playing favorites with third-party licensees. In this case, the issue seems to be 2D versus 3D graphics. Recently, Sony allowed Capcom to press only 30,000 Mega Man 8 PlayStation CDs, reportedly because the game was in 2D. Most people who've been lucky enough to play the game agree Mega Man 8 could have sold well over 150,000 copies. Furthermore, Sony isn't even allowing Capcom to bring Mega Man X4 out at all for the PlayStation. Sure, it's Sony's system, and they can conduct business any way they want, but isn't it our system too, as consumers and enthusiasts? Now, I'm hearing Sony may limit the number of new Castlevania Symphony of the Night games to 30,000, again, because the game is in 2D. Another big mistake. Mega Man 8 and Castlevania are both great games that can and would help sell PlayStations. When will Sony learn that whether a game is in 2D or 3D is of no consequence to gamers? It's the gameplay that matters.
And I think here he's touching on something that's going to come up throughout this episode, which is recognizing that 3D and 2D are not replacements for each other. They are, you know, core design principles or environments to create a great experience. And you need to choose, is this experience that I want to make going to be best in 2D or 3D? Further along in this issue, on page 47, there's a preview of Metal Gear Solid, in which the uncredited writer says, quote, "Unlike Castlevania Symphony of the Night, which Konami wisely left intact as a 2D platform game, Metal Gear Solid is receiving a major graphical overhaul, as these screens indicate. Fortunately for fans of the original, Metal Gear Solid is being headed by the same man responsible for the original Metal Gear, virtually assuring the title will contain the same classic gameplay." I think that there's a lot of like apocryphal memories and reporting on Sony's interference with 2D gaming in the mid to late 90s. I'd love to go back and like really dig deep into not just, you know, like the press around that, but see if there's internal communications out there. Talk to people who were involved in some of these decisions. But here, and in GamePro, as we're about to see, there is a strong record of the games press pushing back against this idea that 2D pixel art games are toast. The Metal Gear Solid preview very clearly lays out the writer's opinion that 2D and 3D was stylistically driven, gameplay oriented, a choice of the creator rather than an objectively better technology. And I think even in 1997, on the, you know, as these systems were maturing, and there's going to be a preview of like Resident Evil, we're seeing previews of Metal Gear Solid, like some of the best games of all time, 3D games of all time, you know, genre creating 3D games. It's nice to see people standing up and saying, hey, don't forget 2D. It creates its own brilliant experiences. And hey, here's Castlevania Symphony of the Night as a great example why.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Mega Man 8 because I actually, when we were looking at, when I was looking at Next Generation issues around and about this time frame, one of them actually had a review of Mega Man 8, and it was like almost 180 from GamePro stance to it, which was like, here's another one of these. I'm furiously trying to see if I could figure out which one it is while I talk, but it's basically, here's another one of these. It's this man, that man, that man, that man. It's the same thing you've played 100 times. It's the eighth one of this. We kind of can't believe they did this again. Da 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 da. It's fine. It's good. If you want another one of these, I guess for some reason, here it is. And there's a screen cap of like this. It's not even a boss. It's like a mini boss fight. That's gorgeous. I mean, huge screen filling sprite, beautiful colors. I'm like, if you're trying to kickstart an indie game, and here's a screenshot, you're gonna get $1 million. It's gorgeous. This is exactly the stuff that so many gamers, and so many, not like Elden Ring numbers, but like many gamers would love to see something with this 2D beauty and hand-drawn art and, presumably amazingly dialed in gameplay, right? So it's like there was and is an appetite for well-made games like this, but at the time, yep, here it is, I've got it. It's issue 29. If you're a fan of the Mega Man series, read no further because you should know exactly what to expect from Mega Man 8, the latest incarnation of the inexplicably popular side-scroller series. There's really only one thing to say. Here we go again. In keeping with what is inherently boring in side-scrollers, that they rely on memorization rather than strategy to get to a sequence, is doubly true of Mega Man 8. There's a rocket jump, there's the mine cart level, blah blah blah. You could argue that the Mega Man series is and always has been aimed at younger gamers, but even the youngest gamers are out playing Tomb Raider these days. This series either needs a serious revamping or a quiet funeral, because even as a side-scroller, Mega Man 8 is just passable. 2 stars. 5. So, like, it wasn't unanimous.
But that guy, like that reviewer also just doesn't like Mega Man.
No bylines. We don't know who wrote that. We don't know where that opinion is coming from.
That's tough. I don't like Mega Man too much, if I can admit that. For some of the reasons that I'm assuming she was just listing. But at the same time, I think that like criticism, I don't think you need to be a fan of something to review it. But it also, you look at it, and if he doesn't like what Mega Man 8 is doing, which is like Mega Man but with nicer PlayStation graphics, then there was nothing that was really gonna work in that situation. And I think that's where in this conversation biases just come into play so much, right? Whether people want to just don't like 2D graphics because they played Stunt Race FX and now they can't think of anything else, or they played Quake, because I was also getting that, at the time, a taste of 3D gaming on my PC, and so I can see playing Quake and be like, I'm never doing pixel art again. That was my experience. But once those biases sort of set in, then that's also going to shape the way people perceive this period, I think.
But all I'm really just saying to point out is like people were after novelty, right? I was just trying to share you a screen cap of this. It's like there's no objective analysis that makes you go, Tomb Raider looks better than this. As we discussed extensively several episodes ago, Tomb Raider's gameplay and platforming was not tuned within a tenth of how tight this certainly was, right? Like, objectively, I'm sure Mega Man 8 is a much more polished gameplay and presentation experience than Tomb Raider, but people were out for that novelty at that point in a way, right?
Yeah, and like, to be fair, like, Tomb Raider was doing a lot of interesting things too, and it's like, it's sort of trading polish for experimentation, which is fair.
But if you're
But that, like, neither one is, like you say, objectively better or more interesting. And you could say that Tomb Raider was more interesting than Mega Man 8 for sure. But like broadly, there are lots of examples of like iterative releases that are great. Yeah, right. Like iterating is not bad. Like Tetris DS was just an iteration on Tetris, and it's fabulous, right? And Tetris, whatever the VR one is called. the new one is just, it's just still Tetris, right? But it's just beautiful, and the presentation's beautiful, and that's okay. Like, that's fun. It's a fabulous game. Luminous just came out with something similar. It's just Luminous, but it has a fabulous presentation, and that's great. Like, it's going to be one of the best games of the year because of that. But Blueprints is also one of the best games of the year, and it's all about new experiences. So it's just kind of tricky, like peeling back, like, was 2D seen as sort of like a conservative, safe way to design a game, and were some critics or executives or marketing people punishing that when people were like, hey, we know how to make these games really good. Let's make really great games that we know are going to be good right off the bat, versus like, hey, we have all this new technology, let's explore it. This is why this portion of games history is so interesting, I think, because there's so much possibility on both sides. But I also think that, like, letting the games industry spend however 15 years perfecting sort of pixel art 2D games, and then going, no, all of that out the window, got to do 3D now. Like, that doesn't make sense either.
Yeah, I think maybe a better comparison, or not a better comparison, but one that feels more resonant with me is the, like, extraction shooter push, right? Like 3, 4, 5 years ago, every executive started going, yes, but can we make it Fortnite to every project, right? Like, yes, everything has to be live subscription. Everything has to be an extraction shooter. Everything has to have loot boxes, and everything has to, So then they chased this, and every team spent 3, 4, 5 years cranking these out, and now they're all hitting, and there's no appetite, there's no interest, right? Or it's just cannibalizing the market, right? Like Battlefield 6 hits, it's a huge hit, and everybody goes, okay, great, and stops playing Fortnite or Siege or whatever it was for like 2 months, and now it's like, oh, hey, what's the new Arc Raiders comes out? Okay, whatever.
And like, when you say everyone, it's not everyone, because kids, like Alpha Gen kids, aren't doing that.
No.
Right? Like, they're sticking with Fortnite or Roblox or wherever their friends are, right?
Right.
They're not dipping out to play the new Call of Duty.
So if Sony's like, everything's got to be 3D in 1995, 1996, 1997, because we're going to be the 3D machine. We made our machine 3D. That's our brand. We have to stick to it. Like, it's not a creative driven decision, right? It's a branding driven decision, or an executive driven decision, or whatever. And
it's funny because, like, some of the, like, big breakouts like Final Fantasy VII recognize that there were some things that 3D couldn't do well, like environments. And sort of like blended 3D and 2D. And I think that was a good indication of like where gaming was at. Like, throwing the baby out with the bathwater or whatever, and saying like, make 3D games, and then you get, some of the nonsense 3D games that like have not held up at all, versus the ones that looked at ways to implement 3D in thoughtful ways, rather than going full bore, have held up better, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely, they have. Okay, well, Aidan, we have flipped open the covers of 2 different magazines, other than the one that we're going to actually look at today. Let's go ahead and get to the flip through on the other side of this break. Folks, if you're not already a member of FunFactor Ultra, enjoying ad-free episodes, then hang tight through this commercial break, pay a couple bills. When we come back, we will flip through GamePro issue 108 and its review of whatever game it is that we're about to review, right here on FunFactor. FunFactor, where 2 old gamers review old video game magazine reviews. Of course, we want you to review us. To get a full 5.0 in FunFactor, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We will read the best, funniest, kindest, and most entertaining ones on the air.
What's the deal with GamePro? We're deep enough into this season that, we're returning to magazines. We've done GamePro in the past. It was not my favorite of the gaming magazines. It felt a little fluffier, a little lighter in content and personality than not individual personality or personality driven content than stuff like EGM or Game Players at the time. We are looking at GamePro number 108 from September 1997. There's 137-ish pages in this, with some throw-ins and like just those little cards and papery things you would get. Number of games reviewed. There's 25 reviews in this magazine, I think. Kind of hard to tell because they're not all clumped together. Previews and reviews are like spread out all throughout the magazine. 10 of the reviews are Castlevania games.
What?
Which we'll get to in a second.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Number of systems reviewed for is 8. So you have the SNES and the Genesis, PC, Nintendo 64, PlayStation, Saturn, NES, and PC Engine.
Ooh.
A lot of games, and kind of the Game Boy as well. Little, sort of. A lot of bangers in this issue, too. Our main review today is going to be Castlevania Symphony of the Night, but not even counting like all the older classic Castlevanias that are reviewed alongside it. You've also got GoldenEye, Ace Combat 2, Ogre Battle, Albert Odyssey, Shining in the Holy Ark, Tetrasphere, like a lot of really great games, and I think that illustrates a console generation that's really starting to hit its stride. And notably, a good mix of 3D games and 2D games.
Yeah, and you've got puzzles, tactics, platformers, explorers, RPGs, GoldenEye, obviously. So yeah, this we're definitely into the like second and third wave of games that are breaking ground all over the place and using everything that the PlayStation can do, from original music, Red Book audio, 3D, 2D, all that good stuff.
Absolutely. The masthead reveals a few familiar names. We've got Wes Nihai, who was editor-in-chief. He's since left Games Media and is currently the membership coordinator at Nishi Bay, Bay Area educational charitable nonprofit organization dedicated to keeping the Japanese American community connected, informed, and empowered. And he's there alongside, presumably, his son Max. Managing editor Kathy Skaggs joins senior editors Mike Wiegand and Lawrence Neves, who has probably written at least one of the Pokemon books in your kid's bedroom, if you've got kids. He's written about a dozen Pokemon books. Listeners might also recognize associate editor of Online, Dan Amrich, who was recently featured in Digital Eclipse's Mortal Kombat Legacy Collection, is a fabulous follow on Blue Sky if you're on Blue Sky. Dan has done so much and knows so much and has been so many places. Fascinating guy. Senior designer, because I always do like to look at the art department on these magazines, because that was such an important part of the experience of reading these. The senior designer, Charmaine Kanui, has since moved into the freelance world and now does marketing, design, photography for companies like Shutterfly and eBay. And so she's, just sort of like taken this experience in the 90s and really run with it. Pretty impressive masthead, even if it doesn't have a lot of the key names that I like personally identified with along the way outside of Amber.
Yeah, okay. Something rang a bell in my head with Francis Mao. The first thing that comes up is this Sonic fandom wiki article. Francis Mao is a staff member who created Sonic the Hedgehog promotional comic. Nothing is known of this individual other than being associated with Sega of America and crediting themselves in the comic. Some sources say they wrote in a Spider-Man magazine and The Adventures of GamePro comics. Their main job was to transcribe Sonic of America's Sonic Bible into a promotional comic book for Sonic the Hedgehog, which now I think this director of editorial and creative services, Francis Mao, did he do a lot of the art? I'm guessing he did the art for GamePro, right? When we talked about this before, that might be what happened, which would make sense how he ended up getting loosely connected with Sega of America and creating this comic, which I love. It's just like all this guy did, this unknown individual. Yes, this is him. Ended up as senior VP in editorial and creative services for GamePro, went to Capcom, was director of events for Sony Interactive Entertainment from 2017 to 2019, and has been full-time corporate creative director at something called Snowflake since 2019. It's like cloud software development. So yeah, Francis Mao. I knew him from somewhere, and that's where.
Remember when Games Media used to be like a springboard into like high-paying careers?
Yeah.
Those are
sometimes even in publishing and media.
Yeah, how many of these people are like executive directors and stuff?
A lot of them,
or freelancers working for eBay and stuff. It is time, however, to get right to the flip through. So let's take a look at GamePro number 108. I've got a couple of doozies for you coming up here. Okay, Ty. We'll get to some of the good stuff in a moment. But since the review we're looking at today is near the front of the magazine, it's billed as a feature story. We're going to flip through in a bit of a haphazard fashion because there's something I really want to focus on in this episode. Ads. We're going to start on pages 3 and 4 with an ad for Final Fantasy VII. In 1997, Squaresoft went hard on Final Fantasy VII's marketing, reportedly spending upwards of $40 million, which matches the development cost of the game. And anyone reading magazines at this time remembers the ad blitz. Can you describe the ad here and tell me what, if anything, stands out to you?
Yeah, it stands out to me that you did a beautiful bit of wordplay. Squaresoft went hard on Final Fantasy VII's marketing without even meaning to. That's outstanding. But yeah, no, coming to a screen near you. And we've got, it's letterboxed horizontally to create a cinematic aspect ratio of Cloud falling towards the camera. And, in full rendered, this is the A-team CG graphic where it's adult sized and proportions, not chibi, textured, pre-rendered with this streaking action, right? And then you just got the Final Fantasy VII logo in the bottom right, Squaresoft and bottom left, Squaresoft and PlayStation logos in the bottom right, and just it's selling this movie, right? The cinematic coming to a screen near you. That's what it looks like, and it absolutely, you're right. It was a huge marketing blitz, and they were covering every magazine at this time, and then also the magazines were finding any way they could to get coverage of Final Fantasy VII in the pages.
Yes, and that's what stood out to me too. These were everywhere. People can remember, there's one of Junon. There were so many of this in this style, but what really stands out to me is exactly what you caught on to, which is that cinematic framing, the 16:9 letterboxed movie ratio, which obviously wasn't used in the game itself. It's very intentional. Alongside the tagline coming to a big screen near you, which is so obviously movie coded. In my book, Fight Magic Items, which looks into the history of Final Fantasy and Japanese RPGs, I discussed how series creator Hironobu Sakaguchi, his long-standing desire was to make films. And he saw video games as an opportunity to kind of get there eventually. And so I don't think that this framing is a coincidence, and I also think it was really important for Final Fantasy VII's just explosive popularity in the West. I think the idea of showing that hey, these games aren't just Donkey Kong single screen platformers. This is a movie, this is an experience. And it's it's a really impressive ad, and it was simple, didn't take much, and it was also the polar opposite in tone of what we're going to see coming up in a few pages.
Yeah, and also I did not read ahead. I did not mean to steal your thunder on that. That was just genuinely my reaction. It's
yes. Hey,
evoking.
why we do this?
Yes,
Absolutely. But video game magazines from the 90s aren't known for good ads. They're known for cringe. Can you flip to page 42 for me, Ty? It's page 48 in the online browser.
Oh wow. Okay.
We have, for some reason, discussed Death Trap Dungeon a fair bit on this podcast. Can you describe the ad for me and then read the big tagline?
Yeah, so we have here a guy chained to the wall of a bleak concrete dungeon looking thing. There's a big heavy wrought iron riveted door, and he's manacled to the wall, kneeling, grimacing expression, no shirt, ratty pants, which look to be like just 90s cargo khakis, just haphazardly cut at the bottom with scissors to make them look like worn through peasant clothes. And then dominating him, literally, standing over him, is a leather-clad dominatrix with thigh-high boots and a bodice thingy, big leather gloves, a whip, hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, and her high-heeled thigh-high boots. She is standing on top of a CRT that is facing him, not us, but him, and glowing.
Now, can you read the tagline, the big one on the left page?
There's only one thing more torturous than playing Death Trap Dungeon. Not playing it.
Okay. So, when I was looking through this magazine, I just had single page scroll because I was looking at a PDF. So I came across this ad, and it just says there's only one thing more torturous than playing Death Trap Dungeon. And you're like, well, that doesn't sound very good, because Death Trap Dungeon famously was not good. It's gotten some very bad reviews, and we've mentioned it and brought it up previously. And then so you scroll down to the next, I scrolled down and saw the next page, and it was the guy. Presumably, Death Trap Dungeon is playing on this CRT that the dominatrix is standing on, and he's like, the torture is that it's there, but he can't play it. But like, even if you buy into this concept, they're still implying that playing Death Trap Dungeon is the second most torturous experience a human could have.
Yeah, no, you're right. Like,
come on. Did they think this one through?
Yeah, no, I don't think they did. I think they're trying to imply that actual torture is more torturous than that, but even then that's not better. That's worse. Being actually physically tortured is the only thing more torturous than playing Death Trap Dungeon. Except then they say not playing it.
I don't know.
That's wild. Yeah, don't know. That's a good point. Oh,
then at the bottom of the ad, we have a URL, www.deathtrapdungeon.com. Can you guess, Ty, where deathtrapdungeon.com sends you?
I can only imagine that it's something like when parents who want to buy like the kids a new soccer ball or something for years, if they put in Dick's.com to go to Dick's Sporting Goods and not Dick'sSportingGoods.com. I imagine it's something along those lines.
It is the official English Square Enix homepage.
Wait, what?
Yeah. So they must maintain all of the old URLs because it's an IDOS game.
Wow.
Yeah. So still deathtrapdungeon.com, still up. We are going to keep moving through the ads in this issue.
That's incredible.
If you thought that one was good, I've got another one for you. Last one. I think this is all we can bear. Please, Ty, head to page 87, which is page 95 in the online browser, and paint with in detail, as much detail as you can stomach, a word picture for the listeners.
Okay, so this is the Lock On Target ad.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so it says Lock On Target in like sort of HUD like fighter pilot type letters, glowing red. At the bottom there's a joystick, Eagle Max, the eagle has landed, and there's the most of the picture, plain white background. Most of the picture is a young man looking up. I guess he's holding a controller, but it is extreme close-up, top-down view of him, extremely foreshortened. His head is most of what we see, and he is slathered in some sort of white goopy goo. It's deeply, deeply unpleasant, and it's all over his head, down his nose, chin, all over his backwards baseball cap, and then just globbed down the front of his shirt. It is on his tongue also. And it's on the controller he's holding. Some's on his shoe, it looks like. And if you squint, I think you can see there is a photoshopped under him shadow of like a hawk or something. But it says, if you're holding a piece of crap, get Eagle Max for PlayStation. It's loaded with analog wheel digital modes and 16 hyper programmable functions. Drop the load. And it feels like what they're going for is load of crap because it's a bird, and bird drops a load. The guy has a bullseye kind of in like a light green somehow on his head, the top of his head, as if the hawk had like painted him for aerial targeting or has like a targeting reticle on him. But the load,
somehow the target is on top of the white
goo
substance.
Yeah. The load being dropped, this doesn't look like bird poop, is what I'm trying to get at. Looks extremely bad and not good also.
We're like, so 1997 had access to the internet. But perhaps we were not all internet pilled at that point. Perhaps we were not familiar with Lemon Party see, and its various less disturbing sort of offshoots. Did they just need a pervert on their design, their creative team?
Maybe.
I've always maintained that every creative needs a pervert.
Yeah.
I think they needed a pervert here.
Yeah.
I think they desperately...
Or at least a metalhead, because I just Googled, and Metallica's Load came out almost exactly a year before this ad. So somebody should have been able to go, hey guys,
yeah,
the effect that we've captured here is not the one we intended.
When I was in high school, right around this time, one of the local punk bands was Spent Load. And all of their posters look similar
to
this.
Gotcha.
So, somebody probably should have known. Very unfortunate. I wonder how that guy's doing.
Yeah, we had a punk band called X-Rated, and that guy went on to found a local barbecue chain that everybody likes. And then he got pretty popular on social media until he slowly got himself canceled. But he and I, both our kids, we stayed in town. And so we have kids in the same grade, which is very funny because our kids are both also in marching band, as we both were. Yeah. And I always want to go hey, in these same stands, your dad was going, I say X, you say rated, X, rated, X, rated. Oh, boy.
Amazing. Yeah, we can all be proud of our parents, I'm sure. Surely these ads were working for the kids, right? Greasing the wheels for future game purchases with loads.
Oof.
Not so fast, says Norway House Manitoba's Chris Apetagon. Back in the reader mail section on page 17, Chris submitted a letter called Add 'em Up. Can you read it for me?
I'm a 14-year-old from Canada and consider myself a gaming veteran. I'm also an avid reader of your magazine. I am writing regarding the advertisements in your magazine. I've noticed that rather than using your pages wisely, almost every right-hand page of your magazine is used for advertisements. In my opinion, instead of all these ads, you may want to consider expanding areas such as Swap Pro or Role Player's Realm. As editors, you must be aware that most youths my age want to read more about these topics. Is the use of advertisements on every page really necessary? Chris Apetagon, Norway House, Manitoba, Canada.
I mean, the more things change, the more they stay the same, right? It's always about balancing that ad revenue against editorial content. And, these small teams probably couldn't have created more editorial content, even if they wanted to.
Right.
But I think I think in a way, Chris had a good point that people were buying it for the editorial stuff. I liked the ads though. I always thought that they were fun and funny and silly. And I remember a lot of them that had a big impact on me. But we're kind of seeing now the flip side of the coin and what happens when the ad market just falls out and nobody can make magazines anymore. Websites can't even really function because the ad market is just toast. And why and how it's so important, despite there being, a cover charge for these magazines, you had by each issue how much revenue was dependent on selling those ads.
It's tough because the quality of ads matters, right? Where and how ads fit into the magazine. Obviously this kid's there's too many ads, but you could just flip past them in a way that doesn't really work now.
No.
On websites, these websites are just covered with ads, and none of them pay anything. And all the pop-ups and popovers and autoplay video and everything, every website long ago gave up on. We won't have that, or we'll try to keep it minimal, especially on mobile. And so, I remember, Aidan, you and I both ran for-profit websites, websites intended to make money at least a little bit, right? Blogs and formatting was important, and page design was important, and layout was important, and we wanted it to look professional and load quickly. And did you have banner ads on A Dribble of Ink?
In the last year or two, I did, but I hand sold them to people.
Oh, that's cool.
I didn't use any ad services.
Cool.
I managed it all myself so that I could choose what ads were going up. It was always relevant, so I was working with self-pub authors and marketing departments. Doing all of that, I managed to pay for my trip to London when I won my Hugo in 2014, but that was
cool.
basically all I accomplished with putting a lot of work into selling ads, which, you know, better than nothing. And if Patreon had existed, would a Dribble of Ink still exist? Maybe. But it wasn't ads. Ads weren't doing it. It would have had to have been like some crowdfunded solution like Patreon.
Yeah, I was luckily hooked up with an ad network. Was affiliated with USA Today, basically. And they were like, yeah, we want to get one blog for each of the 32 teams, and yours is the only Lions blog that's even close to the creative quality we'd want. So yeah. And so I can't remember the exact CPM rate, but I want to say I was getting like 75 cents per like 1,000 impressions. And at the peak, I was getting 50, 60, 70,000 impressions a month, you know? So that was like, you know, 30, 40, 50 bucks. I think the biggest, I want to say the biggest ad check I ever got for them was like $70. And I was like, hey, that's not nothing, you know? Couple cases of beer, you go out once, you know, go out for dinner once a month, like that's not too bad, right? But it was like I was sitting there going, hey, I can put one banner here, I can put one banner along the side, do I want to go 3 banners on the whole site, you know? And I'm putting white space around, then I'm formatting to like make sure it's not interrupting the flow. And now it's just, this is not even a consideration. If you have a website, it's covered in ads, period.
And I mean, like, you know, we are starting to move past that, right? We are having sites like places like Aftermath where, you know, I pay for an Aftermath subscription. I pay for a subscription to like Wired and other places, Digital Foundry, and then I get ad-free experiences. FunFactor.
Hey.
Right? Ultra members have ad-free experiences. And so I do think that, like, recognizing that you can get money out of people in other ways that aren't exploitive. And that's why we have paid options for Ultra members is, you know, help us and you get that better experience. Like everyone knows ads suck, right? Like ads are, especially nowadays, they're not funny or clever. At least back in these magazines, they were funny, right? Like how many people remember the scratch and sniff Earthbound ad? Right, where you scratched it and it smelled like pizza and something else, and then one of them was like Like you know, you can't do that in an audio ad or an online ad. Now they're just like super intrusive advertisements. Some of them are supposed to look like editorials, so you click on them by accident, and like, you know, it's not even the same in terms of how intrusive ads are now compared to back.
I was gonna say, because my kids now that the rat economy has taken hold, all these video platforms that were totally free during the pandemic and unlimited are now all very limited and laden with ads, you know, and my kids are just allergic to them because they came of age with no ads. And now we basically returned to regular TV levels of ads per 22 minutes or whatever. And I keep reminding them, you know, your grandma spent almost her entire career in advertising. Your grandma is smart and funny. Right? Like there are a lot of creative professionals who are in advertising and they try to make it good and they try to make it funny, and it's okay to admit that sometimes it succeeds. And like I understand that people are ad phobic, and I understand that like even Super Bowl ads aren't, you know, what they used to be, right? But like even with misses, like our lock on target poop ad being way off target, they're taking big swings. You know, they're doing something interesting. They're trying to get your attention. They're shooting for a target demographic, right? And even if they miss, there are a bunch of ads that are just like super cool. And unfortunate
language there, Ty. Shooting for a target demographic.
Yeah. Right.
And I mean, like, this era was also like known for its edgy humor in ads, right? Like the Yoshi's Island one about a guy who eats so much he explodes or whatever, and it had nothing to do with the game. It was just edgy. And so, you know, I've worked in advertising and marketing and communications and stuff, and you know, there are a lot of smart people out there trying to reach people, and not everything is for everybody too. Like an ad that doesn't resonate with somebody in these magazines might make someone else laugh, right? And recognizing that that's the case as well is important. But before we go too long, I want to move on to my last part of the flip through. Just a couple pages later, Dan Electro, which definitely his real name, reports on Sega Soft's multimedia player gaming network, Heat.net. Dan, Mr. Electro, wrote, "You're into online gaming. You're probably already aware of services like MPlayer, 10, Engage, Kali, and the Internet Gaming Zone. chances are you have an account on one of them, if not all of them. So why do you need another online gaming network? With Heat.net, Segasoft thinks it has the answer. One service that can do what all the rest can, plus more, in one simple package. I was curious, so I checked out Heat.net. Pretty good URL. Guess where it leads?
The basketball team?
Close. It's a generic WordPress site about, quote, Miami heating and cooling information.
Oh!
So, not
okay.
bad. Pretty close.
Okay.
It might be a scam. I'm not sure. But, I guess Segasoft's gamble did not pay off in the end.
No, it didn't. Didn't make it quite as long as Battle.net.
No. Battle.net won that one, for sure.
No matter how great the writing is in these classic game magazines, our favorite writing to read is yours. When we come back from this ad break, we read your reviews of our reviews of classic video game magazine reviews right here on FunFactor. We've got mail. As promised, we always review the best, funniest, kindest, and most entertaining 5-star Apple Podcast reviews on the air. Bonus points if you say who your favorite host is. Double bonus points if it is Aidan.
Today's review comes from Jason WFD on Apple Podcasts. It's titled Callbacks and Critiques. It's a 5-star review.
Nice.
Amazing. Does mention me, but it also mentions you. So we're, some cookies, some brownies, but not double. This pod, quote, this pod is a fun and informative look back at the media and culture around video gaming from years past. It also examines what makes a review or a magazine good and what falls flat through the interesting lens of foresight, allowing us to look at things from a different perspective. It's my favorite podcast, hands down.
Ooh.
It feels like Ty and Aidan are hanging out with me as we reminisce about when we were younger and how it all compares to today.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what we were going for, I would say. Like the idea of just hanging out, that it feels like we're sitting across the table from each other, remembering things that we experienced, all together. And I'm so glad that's coming across. That's, honestly couldn't ask for a better review than that.
Yeah, Jason WFD, you were locked on target. I mean, that is exactly, like Aidan said, what we are going for, what we love to hear. And that's because that's what it is for us too. We are hanging out, we are enjoying things, and we're not just remembering stuff, but we're trying to cover why this work was important then, why it was important to us then, why it's still important to us now, and why it is what we still do now, and what it means for the world of games and games media and culture and art, and how we interface with things and culture and art. So huge stuff. Thank you so much. Folks, if you would like to have us read your review on air, you know what to do, you know where to do it. Apple Podcasts or YouTube, leave a comment there. That helps a ton. Just any kind of engagement with that. You want to hit us up on our Blue Sky account at FunFactor Pod, or hey, go join the Discord, join the community, talk to us there, ask us questions. We are absolutely available, as is our incredibly high signal, low noise community of people who very often create incredible content, art, writing, magazine, whatever it is themselves. So yeah, just go to our website, funfactorpod.com. Our Discord's on there, our socials are on there. Leave us reviews and comments. We will respond either on the air or however medium you contacted us. Stick right through the break. We'll come right back and get to GamePro and their review of Castlevania Symphony. Out of 5 stars worth of fun today. If you are too, please leave a review. Please shout us out. Please help spread the word, because we love doing this and we want to keep doing it for you. And we want to get these words into the ears of as many people as possible. But hey, it is time to do the thing we do. That the reason we are here, we are going to review GamePro's review of Castlevania Symphony of the Night.
All right, so just to kind of briefly go over GamePro's review format again, they typically have like full page reviews rather than capsule reviews. And famously, of course, they have their review matrix of graphics, sound control, and FunFactor. Hey. Leo.gif. And each one is accompanied, of course, by a funny little graphic of a guy getting more or less excited based on the score. Throughout this magazine, reviews are sort of like, they're kind of clumped together, but they're also interspersed with previews. This Castlevania review happens very early in the magazine, and then there's a lot of previews and then more reviews. Some of the reviews are scored. There's even a couple that aren't. Role-playing games are at the back with the sports games in their own little sections. Yes. Very strange. It made for a more sort of like linear front-to-back experience reading the magazine, because like for me, I would often like race to my favorite section in other magazines. A little harder to do that in GamePro. But this issue's review of Symphony of the Night comes from Major Mike.
I've seen a couple movies about him.
Yeah, I know. It was good. He was a good dancer. Got naked a lot.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
He was good in X-Men. I think I mentioned this before, but I actually played Castlevania Symphony of the Night before its Western release, thanks to a friend's stepbrother who got a bootleg copy during some travels to Thailand. It was definitely easier to understand what was going on than in the Japanese bootleg of Final Fantasy Tactics he also brought back. But that was really like my first experience with Castlevania. I didn't have an NES. I only rented one. So I would play Chip and Dale or I would play Mario, but never Castlevania. And I just, the Super Nintendo ones just kind of passed me by. So this was like my first experience with the series, and I just absolutely fell in love. The like RPG aspects, the non-linear map, the like breakout of the levels, like it all just being a big open world, the loadouts and the player agency within that. But what really separates it for me from like previous Castlevanias or stuff like Mega Man was just how tight the controls were. It just feels good to move around in that world. It was a favorite immediately when we played that Japanese version. Again, when I got it, when it came out in North America, and it just still remains a favorite of mine that I love to play through. Looks incredible on a CRT if you ever have the option. To play it on original hardware on a CRT, it's just beautiful. It sounds beautiful. The soundtrack is just so good. The composer is not great. Music she made is fabulous, and it just holds up, and it's just a beautiful experience. It's just a 10 out of 10 game. The only knock you could hold against it is it's pretty easy after the first hour or so, but like it's just too fun to just rip through and explore the castle and fight some baddies, and the vibes, man, the vibes off the chart. What was your experience with Symphony of the Night?
Well, I was a big Castlevania head at the beginning, played a lot of 1, rented 2 several times, didn't beat it till I went to a kid's house. It was like my mom's friend, and he had a Game Genie. As we've discussed, I'm not a Game Genie guy, I'm not a codes guy, and neither are you really, but we kind of went, hey, you know what, let's just hack this thing and beat the game. So we beat Castlevania 2 that day, just because we could. And but Castlevania 3 was actually my favorite of the series pre Symphony of the Night, and probably still is, just because it imprinted on me so hard. Branching paths and multiple characters, playing as Alucard or Simon the pirate guy, just really, really cool. And so Symphony of the Night, I actually played this, I think, for Game Boy Advance and not PlayStation. So then, as we've discussed, a Game Boy Advance was the only actual Game Boy that I had. I was never a handheld guy. I was never a mobile gaming guy. But for some reason, the Game Boy Advance kind of called to me. The color screen, the high power graphics for the time. So yeah, I remember playing this and loving it. And exactly like you said, I was a sucker then for RPG progression and mechanics and character arc, and exploration and all that stuff. I love that stuff, and playing it while I was trying to sit near several different lamps angled at various degrees, trying to cast light on the screen without casting glare on the screen so I could actually see what was happening was, I had a lot of fond memories.
Yeah, well, whatever you played was not Symphony of the Night because it wasn't on Game Boy. You're probably thinking of Circle of the Moon. which was sort of like, so after Koji Igarashi, who sort of headed Symphony of the Night and created this new format, he moved on to the Game Boy Advance, and he had some fantastic Castlevania follow-ups. Circle of the Moon was a bit more of a mix of Symphony of the Night and traditional Castlevania.
Okay.
And then there was, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm blanking on the second one, which overcompensated for the Game Boy Advance's dark screen. And then the third one, Aria of Sorrow, is, in my opinion, the best of the Castlevania games. But yeah, so Symphony of the Night came out on PlayStation, technically came out on Saturn, but then PlayStation Portable, PSP is probably the next place people would play.
Okay.
Or Xbox Live Arcade.
So I guess I actually have to play the real Symphony of the Night now.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because if you're talking about playing and trying to find the brightest light in your house, that was probably Circle of the Moon.
Okay.
Which is also an interesting game, but yeah, definitely takes more from the traditional Castlevanias than Symphony of the Night did. We gotta get you to play Symphony.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to. I didn't realize this was a hole in my backlog.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Oh, you're so lucky. It's so good. Okay. Starting on page 30, we've got GamePro doing something interesting that I'd mentioned earlier, and it's combining their cover story, their big feature for the issue, and the review. So the review is the feature cover story.
It says cover feature Castlevania on both sides on bumpers, and then there's also scores at the bottom.
Right? So, like, what do you think of this tie? Like, Symphony of the Night, legit classic, so maybe it wasn't an issue here specifically, but does this concept compromise the ability of the critic to be honest? Because this would have been negotiated as a cover feature, like, months prior. You can't give it a 2.5 out of 5.
Yeah,
if it's a cover feature.
Yeah, you can't. If this is a
like, what if it was Boston?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I mean, and they definitely, the Castlevania mania, like they photoshopped the Castlevania logo and like extended it and tried to match the red in the font to make it say Castle. Then like the Ania they had to make the M. I think they made the M out of the V.
What did they get?
What?
The Ania?
The Ania, yes. The ANIA. They just copy pasted that. They clone tooled that. And then I think they used the V in Castlevania to construct an M. If I'm looking at this right. And I might not be. But yeah, no, and the splashy spread, they've got some of the box art graphics here, lovingly X-Acto tooled out and splashed across the page. We also have PlayStation review, just kind of this, I don't know, gold hand art drawn over red to kind of try and match the Castlevania thing. They definitely both tried to make this a splashy art piece, like lavish a lot of layout and design attention on it. But as I'm looking through the review here really quick, this seems to also come from just a genuine place of passion and excitement about what a big game this is, what a good game this is, and what it means for the current state of the industry at the time of the writing.
Absolutely. So it's a big feature, but the review of the game itself is kind of a small part of it. It's not a super long review. It's maybe like 400 words tops. And then there's a little like capsules for graphics, sound control, and FunFactor. But you're right that this seems like something that, GamePro, and going back to our earlier conversation, really wanted to highlight, like, hey, look how good this looks. And then go compare it to the little screenshots of a tiny little like sidebar preview of Castlevania 64, which looks terrible.
God, it's so
it's so bad. Like, it looks like a bad tech demo of what they would have said, like, hey, look at what this Nintendo 64 is going to be able to do.
Hey, can you see? Got a sidetrack. You talked about FunFactor and noticing, and like the little reacts, the little things that we have as reacts in our Discord, the 1 through 5 with half steps thing. The guy is a Dracula, is a vampire. They colored his hair black. I noticed there was something funky about the sprite. Blow it up. They colored his hair, which is normally like a white spiky outline, into fine textured black hair, and then gave him fangs also. So he's a 5.0, not to ruin it, but a 5.0 in graphics, sound control, and FunFactor. And what's normally a red background with black outline and white it's just been Dracufied for this specific thing. A beautiful touch.
did not notice that. I noticed that they look different. I didn't connect the dots there. They still, like, as you've brought up now, they still use a regular review matrix, even though this is like a feature. So graphics, sound control, fun factor. They spread them out across a couple of pages, though. So you're not getting it all in like one condensed little area where you can get that, like, oh, how did it do? They want you to explore the whole feature. As you said, though, rightly, it gets full marks in each category. But let's get into the actual, like, text of the review itself. You know what? Before we do that, if you scroll a little bit further down, part of what makes this a feature and what's kind of interesting from the perspective of reviews is, so the first page is a review of Castlevania, which we'll get to. The second page is a bunch of screenshots and, like, official art from the game, which the game has amazing official art. And, you know, having that access to that is always beautiful. Like, sometimes the art used in these magazines was a little dodgy. This is not dodgy. And then the third and fourth page in this feature story are like retro reviews of a bunch of Castlevania games. So the header is 16-bit gamers survival guide special Castlevania Rises from the Grave. And so they have a review of Super Castlevania 4 for the Super NES. Got 5 across the board. Castlevania Bloodlines 1994 Genesis. It got 4s, 4.5, and a 3.5. Dracula X for the Super Nintendo got 3.5, 4, 4.5, 2.5. So, you know, middle ground there. Then it gets into a little cutout sideboard, basically saying like, hey, there's some Game Boy ones. They're fun, which is, yeah, fair. But we even have a NES reviews in here in GamePro 1997. So Castlevania 1, 2, and 3, which they seem to review all together. Maybe? No. Well, oh. Yeah, okay, interesting. So I didn't notice this when I was reading through earlier, but it says Castlevania and Castlevania 2 came out before GamePro's first issue was published. So these two lead-off games in the Castlevania series were never reviewed. So they must actually be pulling reviews from their
yes, it is, because the Castlevania 3 review here is byline C Pro Review October 90. So yeah, they're reprinting the reviews from when they have
which is something you never saw, right?
No.
At that time, like that was not a normal thing. So I do think it's very interesting and like an interesting way to do like a feature about a series, especially because I think there was a very pointed, you know, desire to stand for these 2D graphics. Like I think that this issue from, you know, just the review as we're going to get to, you know, really just wanted to make sure that we weren't forgetting how great, you know, these graphics could be. So in the cutout and the little sidebar for Castlevania 64, it says it's, you know, Castlevania is coming to Nintendo 64. Although early in development, the game looks promising with cool effects and what appear to be multiple player characters. The game will be in full 3D, so Symphony of the Night might be the last 2D Castlevania. It wasn't.
Nope.
But I do want to consider that and keep that language in our back pocket, specifically like the game looks promising with cool effects in our back pocket and compare it to the language used for Symphony of the Night. So let's get into the actual review. Ty, can you read the first paragraph for me?
It's fitting that on Castlevania's 10th anniversary, the first 8-bit NES title appeared in 1987, Symphony of the Night, one of the strongest games in the series, will appear. Symphony will please longtime Castlevania fans, and it proves once again that when comparing 2D games to 3D games, less is sometimes more. A lot.
I think it's like really notable that Major Mike is doubling down on 2D graphics. The subhead for the review is Castlevania Symphony of the Night drives a stake through the heart of 2D critics. There's like, this is pointed. This is saying like, hey, we need more of this. Like, stop attacking the idea that 2D is superior, inferior. And then there's the biggest screenshot right at the top of the review. The caption for that is, quote, stunning 2D graphics make Symphony of the Night the best looking Castlevania yet. Compare that to the language used for Castlevania 64, which was, quote, looks promising with cool effects. I think that you can kind of read behind the lines about, how at least Major Mike at GamePro, but also, the quotes from PSX that we read earlier in this episode. Like, there were people out there being like, hey, this is a mistake to drop this style of game.
Yeah, for sure. And it's very clear from these graphics and, the fidelity and resolution of, these realistic looking graphics. I look at the horse here in this shot, right? Of the horse like rearing and turning its head, and I was thinking about the 3-headed dragon from the Death Trap dungeon ad, which looks like it was somehow made of about 14 polygons, and those significantly less artistically curved necks, right? Like just what was possible here creatively from both a fantasy standpoint and a realism standpoint, and certainly blending the two is, and it holds up. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, absolutely. And, like Square would get, some pretty impressive places by the end of the PlayStation's lifespan. I would say that Vagrant Story is a game that looks on par as a full 3D game on par with something like Symphony of the Night, but it wasn't happening early or midway through this, this console's lifespan. The real meat, before we get to the real meat of the review, I think one other thought I just had is it mentions at the beginning, like, this was released around the 10th anniversary of Castlevania. In 10 years from the debut on the NES, you got how many games? You got Castlevania 1, 2, and 3 on the NES. You got 2 Game Boy games.
Super Nintendo.
Rondo of Blood on PC Engine is mentioned here, right? You got Castlevania 4, Super NES, Bloodlines. You got Dracula X on the Super NES. Like, you got so many, like, top tier Castlevanias. And that kind of comes back to the idea we were talking about where, they had a formula that worked. And Castlevania moving into the 3D realm never really worked. And recognizing that trying to force a genre or a series or a gameplay style into, like, a different environment or tech environment just doesn't always work well. And, like, Castlevania releases started slowing down after this point, except for the Game Boy ones. And when there was that low tech Game Boy environment, handheld only environment, it kind of allowed series like Castlevania to continue to live because it needed to be 2D. It needed to be pixel art. It was, if the Game Boy didn't exist, it probably would have just died. Kind of did just die anyway. But like the 3D games, whether it's Castlevania 64, Lament of Innocence, or the one on the Xbox 360, Lord of Darkness, which I kind of liked, but didn't feel like a Castlevania game. When you look at, like, classic after classic after classic coming out in a 10-year span, and recognizing that, like, sometimes as tech expands, our resourcing and time and space to take advantage of that tech doesn't keep up. And I wonder how that impacts games within that, space, or that 2D versus 3D argument.
Yeah, and I do think, you look at the Castlevania 64 screenshots, I think it's notable that pre-development screenshots also figure heavily in the game's Wikipedia article, right? Because I think the idea of, hey, what can we do with a Silicon Graphics dev kit and go, this is what a 3D Castlevania could look like, right? Here, you've got Simon and or Trevor Belmont in a, basically blank room with a gray floor and, like, some dynamic lighting, whipping a full 3D skeleton, right? And you think, that could be pretty sweet. Imagine if there was also, like, a whole other game around this and it was good, but this is more like the elements of an interesting cutscene than a playable thing,
right?
Like, and given the 64's horsepower, that a game like this is gonna be him going to fighting one of these skeletons at a time in blank gray stone hallways, right? Because there's just not that much power available for this thing. And is it that the market wanted 3D? Yeah, but is it that executives wanted 3D because the market wanted 3D? Yeah, but I have to think that was also, at least partly artistically, for at least some studios going, oh my gosh, what can we make? What could we make? Yeah. And both the vision often exceeding the grasp, and also, tools right? Like this is going to be a thing for 10 more years. We're going to be reading magazines printed 10 years from now where developers are going, this is our idea, and then going, yeah, oops, we didn't have the tools for this.
Right. Yeah, and I think like what's interesting too is like looking at Castlevania and saying like, oh, they have all these tools now. How can we leverage our existing IPs to almost sell the technology, right? And say like people will want a Castlevania. So like, whereas you look at some of the successful franchises during this period, and you know, there's stuff like Gran Turismo, of course, which was fabulous, and 3D was a really good transition for racing games, right?
Yeah.
But you look at Final Fantasy, and we saw everybody saw that tech demo, right? That Squaresoft tech demo of the 3D Final Fantasy 6 characters. But what did they end up doing? They ended up using pre-rendered backgrounds, fixed cameras. You know, they ended up using most of the framework from the 16-bit era.
Yeah.
And then just adding a bit of 3D in there. The first fully 3D Final Fantasy wasn't until Final Fantasy 11, the MMO. On the PlayStation 2.
Right.
Because like even though Final Fantasy 10 used fully 3D environments and characters, for the most part, there are pre-rendered backgrounds still in that game. It was still a fixed camera. You weren't moving around in full 3D environments in that game. And so, you know, even Square with Final Fantasy saw like, you know, we can't just say like, oh, this series is now a fully 3D game. Square's first fully 3D game was Vagrant Story, which was a new IP, you know, by Matsuno, who had kind of proved himself with Final Fantasy Tactics. And I think it's interesting that like some of the most impressive 3D work on the system was from a company that, you know, quite tentatively waded into 3D space rather than just trying to like cram whatever they currently had into that design space.
Yeah, no, I think I just wanted to say real quick, the point that you make about using the art to sell the tech kind of reminded me of the 3D, the most recent 3D movie fad from, you know, about 10 years ago, right? When all of a sudden especially every animated movie was getting a 3D release and they were doing 3D TVs and stuff. Then partly it was because they could, you know, sometimes do it without glasses, right? And, you know, going and seeing movies like we saw, I want to say it was Despicable Me 2 in theaters with our kids, and there were several shots that just weren't interesting. Like there's one where like, okay, a submersible goes underwater, and there's like a 30-second shot of just like water and bubbles, and we're going, what is happening? We looked at each other like, what is the movie broken? Like, what are the oh, it's not interesting unless it's in 3D, right? Unless you're just Googling at, oh, the bubbles, I see them floating. Ooh. Then like it's not interesting and it's not creative and it doesn't make any sense, right? So I think you're seeing some of that for sure. And you know, some cases it's what can we do with this tech? And then other cases it's like, we wanted to use this toy and we wanted to sell you, hey, and we wanted to put on the back of the box, this uses XYZ.
Yeah. I think like, I'm glad you bring up film because I think a lot about the current style used by a lot of popular animated films these days, which is like, instead of viewing traditional animation and computer animation as distinct styles that are used one or the other, we've really started to see a blend of the two in stuff like Mitchell's versus the Machines or Spider-Man, the Wild Robot Bad Guys. They use sort of like 3D animation, 3D environments, 3D characters, but then they use and mix in hand-drawn animated flourishes or facial expressions or whatever. It works really great. It's beautiful and kind of combines the best parts of both styles together into something that feels fresh. And for the first time, I watch these movies and I say, hey, we're finally catching up to the best of what Disney was doing with traditional animation 25 years ago. And, you know, we're seeing something similar in the video game space where I'm finally starting to play games like Clair Obscur. And I'm like, okay, we're getting to the place where 3D can now create environments in RPGs that feel on par with what Square Enix was doing in 1999 with Final Fantasy. Right? Yeah. Super Mario Wonder kind of finally used the same technique, as those movies to finally solve the modern 2D Mario puzzle by using a 3D engine. It's a 3D game, but looking back to keyframe heavy 2D animation techniques that were adding character to the character animations and, you know, the entire game in a way that the fully 3D animated Wii and Wii U games were just completely missing and felt very sterile because of that. So, like, I think that as we watch and recognize that these are not distinct ways of making games, but tools within game space, you know, we've just gotten into better and better places. There's so many games nowadays that are quote unquote 2D games. Something like Dead Cells is technically built in a 3D engine, but it's presented as a 2D pixel art game. And so you have, you know, like, it's not one or the other, and it's not objective, and there's not better or worse. And I'm glad to see that, like, at this time, even you had people like Major Mike saying, hey, let's do this. This is okay. I'm going to read the end of the review, which is where the real meat comes from. Symphony, so quote, Symphony is long, involving, and impossible to put down, not to mention just plain fun. It constantly refreshes your interest, whether it's with a clever plot twist or a newly acquired ability. While diehard Castlevania fans will debate if this is the best Castlevania game ever, one thing's certain. Symphony looks the best and sounds the best. And then under a header for the very final section that says 2D is okay. Konami uses a 2D engine in Symphony and delivers one of the best games of the year. Run, don't walk to get this Castlevania. It's one symphony worth attending.
Hey, hit the applause. Woo!
I know we've talked about this before in other reviews of like the classic games we've covered, but like, if anything, I love that this goes deep into like defending 2D art, but I almost feel like the reviewer, despite giving it straight fives, almost doesn't realize like how big and influential this game was about to become.
No, it's definitely like selling you on, like, I know it's 2D, but look, it's awesome. It's so great. You got to go get it. Trust me, go get it. It's great. It almost reads like, you know, a couple of years prior, game players trying to sell people on Chrono Trigger, right? Like, I know it's an RPG, okay, but like, trust me, like, go play it. It's so good. I can't even describe how good it is.
Almost like defensive instead of like recognizing and realizing like, oh no, like in 28 years, Silk Song's going to come out and it's going to crash like Steam servers, right? Like it's just, it's wild how this happens. You know, Elden Ring, I think there's a direct line between Elden Ring and Symphony of the Night. You know, and just the biggest games owe so much to this.
There's 100 million Metroidvanias that are also Souls-likes, right? Like that are working backwards and going, well, we can't make Elden Ring, but we can make a 2D game that looks like Elden Ring and is 10 hours long, right? So there you go.
Or 45 hours long, like Silk Song.
Yeah. But I mean, the indie, small teams can go, we can't make anything that looks like Elden Ring, but we can make something that looks like Symphony of the Night and has those same progression mechanics.
100%. But let's do it, Ty. Let's review the review. What do you think? Straight fives for Major Mike, like Symphony of the Night, or something a little low?
No, I'm gonna give it straight fives, and I think it's because I don't know if Major Mike wrote all the sub scores right, because it almost feels it's a little bit more it's punched up a little bit, right? Graphics 5.0, beautifully rendered visuals provide eye-popping detail, from clouds blowing across the moon to Alucard's cape flapping in the wind. The bosses, which range from big to gigantic, appear in nauseatingly fine detail. Arresting orchestral composition and grinding rock tunes. Alucard's a breeze to command thanks to the perfect controls. And so you're sitting here and going, I feel like those add a little bit more like fancy critique, whether Mike wrote them or an editor. I'm driving it. I think an editor wrote this because just the voice is different. And that also kind of, because they're in isolated sub boxes, gives you a like, hey, this is a passionately positive review and here's why. And it's not just because Castlevania is cool. It's not just because 2D is okay. It's not just because this is the apex of a series that you already love, a series you already loved. It's like, hey, on a technical level, graphics, sound, control, fun factor, this is a 5 out of 5, and here's why. And I think that adds the sort of gravitas to kind of counterweight just some of the more passionate fan stuff and a lot of the all over the place and certainly equally passionate graphical design and layout choices.
Yeah, I think it's a really good review, especially taking as the whole feature itself. I think I'm not going to go straight fives, maybe knock off half a point somewhere, because I do think that the almost, as much as I admire him going to bat for 2D graphics, I do, like I just said, think that in some ways it almost feels like a defensive response rather than a like, no, this game isn't just good now. It's not just good compared to what's come before. It will be a good game 25 years from now. Now, you know, it's hard to see the future, but Castlevania Symphony of the Night was pretty special. I also wish that there was some contextualization of how Symphony of the Night blended Castlevania with like Super Metroid or Zelda.
Sure. Yeah.
And some understanding of like, hey, like this is Castlevania, but it's also looked at the success of these other games or whatever. And so, you know, I think there could have been a little bit more around the opinion stuff about like technical aspects or gameplay aspects. So, you know, maybe not straight fives. I would put a 4.5 in there for prescience, I guess.
Sure. And then, but I'm also inclined to round it up because of just the interestingness of this project, where this is the lead title anchoring this feature section and then reprinting their old scores and reviews for all the other Castlevania games and walking you through that history back to front kind of thing. I think that's cool.
I think that's cool too. Yeah, I liked it more than I thought I would when I first saw it, when I was scrolling through the issue trying to find one to cover for this episode. But I do think, like, you know, I want them to touch on the history of like the other series that influenced this game, but going so deep on Castlevania is definitely something that I would have liked to have seen more back then, to give people, and like even now, like I do know, you know, in the games critic space, sometimes I see criticism of younger writers, not for being young, but lacking sort of the context to write about some of the games or the topics of the series that they're writing about, without doing the research required because they weren't there to live through it. And I think that strong understanding of like history of something like Castlevania informs the reader of how and why the new one is special, or why the changes it made are so big. So it's fun. Like I like seeing a deep dive into a series like this.
Yes. Sorry, I was very quickly trying to pull up the viral blue sky shot of a couple of younger Zoomers / maybe older alphas with, hey, we're here at this protest, and it's the guy from Young Sheldon, Sean. Like, yeah. That's good. And like, no shade to those kids for not having been born in 1981, but like, you know, that's what we're talking about here.
But like on the flip side, you know, I'm 41, right? And on the flip side, I saw there was a bit of a viral blue sky post going around of a Twitter screenshot of some guy being like, you know, like for all those people who say JRPGs are for kids, you should play Octopath Traveler. It's got murder and betrayal and all the dark storytelling elements. Somebody responds and goes like, who says that? Who says JRPGs are for kids?
No.
And the guy goes, oh, well, you know, it's just like common, you know, like people used to say during like the PlayStation 2 era and the PlayStation 3 era, like, you know, JRPGs are for kids and CRPGs are for adults. And then the guy responds, he's like, it was 15 years ago, man. Like, you can't use 15-year-old arguments to try to, like, you know, sell some point. You're tilting at windmills a little bit here, buddy. So, you know, it goes both ways. Context and history and experience that you're not willing to move past also kind of has that negative impact too.
Yeah, I try not to use this show to settle old scores. Every once in a while, it's tough. But yeah, you know, part of age should be growth, and should be the wisdom to look back and go, hey, like, no, this actually was cool, or no, we overlooked this, or we gave this too much credit, or we didn't give this enough credit. So, what do you think? Did we give this review of Symphony of the Night enough credit? Too much credit? not enough, leave us a review at Apple Podcasts, post us a comment on YouTube. We'll read the best, kindest, funniest, and most entertaining ones on the air. And hey, go ahead and pass this show around to all your friends like it's third grade and we're on the playground. Shout us out on Blue Sky, YouTube, and TikTok at FunFactor Pod. Special thanks to Millennium Falck for all our amazing original music. Check out his work and his incredible Windows 95 website at millenniumfalck.com. Unlike these old magazines, you won't have to wait a whole month for your next installment. We're dropping new episodes every 2 weeks. So, go to funfactorpod.com, follow our show on your podcatcher of choice. Please consider becoming a member of Fun Factor Ultra, our premium tiers that unlock ad-free episodes, bonus episodes, and the swanky members-only channels of our Discord. Just go to funfactorpod.com, and I promise you will not miss the sign-up widget on our homepage. If you do, you and we will have a maximum score in Fun Factor. Okay, great. And as usual, zooming the web browser unzooms the actual picture of the thing, which is the opposite of the effect that I want. Oh, good gravy. Okay, I can do this.
This is excellent.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry if you give me like 30 seconds. I just lost it trying to zoom in.
Good.
Boop.
This is why we need to record in the Video Game History Foundation.
Yes. Yes.
Right, meet up there. We'll fly down to
Washington State. Okay.
It's Washington State? Is that where they're at?
I actually don't know.
Seattle or San Francisco?
Okay.
San Francisco.
Ready to transition?
Yeah, I think you could throw to the break. Square. Sorry, what were they called at that point? Enix. I have Square Enix in my script. Were they Squaresoft at that point?
You see at the bottom of the page, there's coming to a screen near you, the bottom right corner, it says Squaresoft right next to the PlayStation logo. Yeah.
You know, in 1997, Square keep screwing up. In 1997, not so fast though, says Norway House Manitoba's Chris Apetagon.
Pentagon? Yeah.
Chris Apetagon. You just
I
think at this point.
Sorry, I was looking up heat.net, segaretro.org. Yeah, interesting. All right. Do we have a letter to read?
There's a new review
oh, hell yeah.
on Apple. Yeah, it's pretty good. It's really good.